Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear student teachers, today we are going to have lecture number 4 of Functional English 1. In lecture 4, we are going to look at social interactions. And you know, social interaction is one of the important speech function. The name of this course is Functional English 1. And in this course we learn how to perform various speech functions. Social interaction is probably one of the most important speech function that we have to perform. Last time we learned some social interactions. Today we will learn inviting and responding to invitations. Can you remember when you last time invited someone to some event? Maybe you did it yesterday, maybe 1 week ago, maybe 1 month ago, but I'm sure that you had to invite at least once in a year. So it's important to learn English phrases for inviting and also for responding to invitations. But before we start with lecture number 4, let's have a quick recap of lecture number 3. In lecture 3, we learned social interaction. In particular, we learned how to greet others in variety of situations. We also learned how to respond to a positive event. That means whenever you hear a good news, how do you congratulate someone? We also learned how to use formal and informal expressions of gratitude appropriately. By gratitude we mean saying thanks. And we learned ways how to appropriately say thanks in different situations. Apart from these listening and speaking activities, we also learned writing. We learned how to write a short thank you note, and we also learned how to write a formal letter of thanks. Besides writing, we also learned reading skill, and you were provided with a short reading story which contained expressions of gratitude in it. Now we move on to lecture number 4. The objectives of lecture number 4 are that you should be able to use polite expressions of invitations. As I talked earlier, almost every day or every other day we have to invite someone for some occasion, for some event. And here we will learn some useful expressions to politely invite people. We will also learn how to invite others through a telephone call. So I'll give you some situations, and I would like you to practice keeping those situations in mind. We will also learn how to accept an invitation politely. So if someone has invited you to an event or an occasion, how you are supposed to accept that invitation. And it's easy to accept invitation, but sometimes for some reason you have to refuse an invitation. That means for some reason you can't accept the invitation. So we will also learn how to politely decline an invitation if it is the requirement. And in lecture 4, we will also learn how to write a short invitation letter or an email, and we'll also learn how to write a follow-up letter. By follow-up letter, I mean that once you have sent an invitation letter to someone, he or she responds to it. Now, how are you going to write the reply to that response? Because usually the interaction doesn't end there, and once someone has accepted your invitation, you also have to send a follow-up email or a letter. So in lecture number 4, we will learn all these, and I would appreciate if you remain attentive and pay attention to the details. Let's begin with some useful expressions that we can use for inviting informally. As always, there are various contexts, various situations in which we have to invite people. So let's start with informal situations. Normally, when you invite your brothers, sisters, close relatives, friends, you invite them informally. Let's look at the first phrase here. Why don't we? Why don't we? Why don't we go out for an ice cream? Why don't we go out for an ice cream? This is an informal invitation. You can also use let's. Let's. Let's is the short form for let us. Basically, it's a suggestion. But here we can use a suggestion in order to invite informally. So we can say, let's have an ice cream. Let's have an ice cream. So it's like an invitation, especially if you say, let's have an ice cream, I'm buying. Let's have an ice cream, my treat. So the phrase is, I am buying, and my treat actually gives clear indication that you are inviting your friend. Similarly, we can say, how about, or what about. So we can say, how about a long drive? How about going for a hiking? What about playing golf? What about playing tennis? Similarly, we can also use some other informal expressions like care for, and you see the question mark at the end. Care for some ice cream? Care for a dinner tonight? We can also say, are you up for? Are you up for hiking this afternoon? Are you up for a long drive? Are you up for a dinner? We can also use why not. Why not is also a suggestion, but it can be used to invite people informally. Like you have an example given at the bottom of this screen, the second last sentence. Why not join us for the birthday party? Why not join us for the birthday party? This is an informal invitation. Similarly, we can use shall we? Shall we have the lunch together? Shall we have lunch tonight? ये लास्ट सेंटेंस रिपीट कर दीजिएगा. Shall we have the dinner tonight? Shall we have dinner tonight? We can also use fancy or do you fancy? Like Fancy going out for a movie? Do you fancy going out for a movie? Similarly, we can use do you feel like? Do you feel like going out for a movie? Do you feel like going to a library? Do you feel like shopping? Do you feel like actually means how do you say to? What do you say to? Like if I say, do you feel like going shopping? It means, how do you feel if I suggest that we go shopping? Okay, here we have some phrases. I read them again. Why don't we? Let's. How about? What about? Care for? Are you up for? Why not? Shall we? Fancy? Do you fancy? Do you feel like? Now the last two expressions, fancy, do you fancy, and do you feel like, they take the ing form of the verb. So you say, do you fancy going out for a movie? Not do you fancy go out for a movie. Instead we say, do you fancy going out for a movie? Do you feel like going shopping? Do you feel like playing basketball? So keep it in mind that the last two expressions here, they take the ing form of the verb. Very good. Now we move on to learning expressions of invitation, but this time we will use them for formal situations. Let's look at the expressions. Would you like to? I'd like to ask you to. It would be my pleasure if you would. May I have the honor of your? I was wondering if you would like to. How would you like to? So here we have some sentences. Would you like to come round for a meal? Would you like to come round for a meal? I'd like to ask you for a dinner tonight. I'd like to ask you for a dinner tonight. I'd is the short form for I would, but normally in speaking we speak it as I'd, not I would. I'd like to ask you for a dinner tonight. It would be my pleasure if you join us for the birthday party. It would be my pleasure if you join us for the birthday party. Remember the word pleasure. It is not player, it is pleasure. How would you like to play golf tomorrow afternoon? How would you like to play golf tomorrow afternoon? May I have the honor of inviting you to dinner? May I have the honor of inviting you to dinner? So you see, when you want to invite someone formally, the structure is usually much longer and it is more complicated. But I think you should note down these structures and you should practice them in various situations because they are really very useful. Now we move on to accepting invitations. Okay, we have learnt some expressions to invite others, but what if someone else invites us to an event? Well, let's first learn how to accept these invitations. So if someone says, would you like to go out for a dinner? You can respond to it by saying, that's very kind of you. Thank you for inviting me. I would like that very much. Or alternatively, you can say, I'd be delighted to come. I'd be delighted to come. Optionally, you can also say, thank you, That would be very nice. I look forward to it. Thank you. That would be very nice. I look forward to it. I look forward to it means I am hopefully expecting it. Okay, so far you have looked at accepting invitations in formal situations. Look at the first one. That's very kind of you. I'd like that very much. I'd be delighted to come. That would be very nice. So the word would actually suggests that all the three sentences, the first three sentences, they can be used for accepting invitations in formal situations. But in informal situations, we can simply say, yes, please, thanks. Yes, please, thanks. Or we can say, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Or we can say, what a good idea. What a good idea. Similarly, we can say in informal situations, we can also say, that sounds good. That sounds fun. That sounds lovely. Well, the next one is also a formal response because you see the word I'd. I'd is the short form for I would, which means that usually we would respond to a formal invitation in this way. So you can say, if someone invites you to a dinner, you can say, sure, I would love to come. Sure, I would love to come. Okay, here is another informal expression which is pretty common, and that is, okay, cool. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Cool is something like, it means that it's wonderful, it is fantastic. All right, now that we have learnt some expressions of accepting invitations, now we move on to a little more difficult part, and that is setting the detail for the invitation. Normally the dialogue doesn't end there. If someone invites you and you reply by accepting the invitation, normally you have to ask more questions. You have to inquire more details. So here we have a list of some common expressions, common questions that you can ask after you have accepted an invitation, either formally or informally. For example, you can ask, what time should I come? What time should I come? Of course, it is very important information, very crucial piece of information. If you don't know the time, merely accepting the invitation is useless. Similarly, you can say, where shall we meet? Where shall we meet? Shall I pick you up? Shall I pick you up? Shall I pick you up is actually an offer, not just a question, it's an offer. What time? What time? What time is the same as saying, what time should I come? But it is more informal. What time does it start? What time does it end? So if someone has invited you to an event which has the starting and ending time, after you have accepted the invitation, you can also say, what time does it start? What time does it end? And if you have earlier decided that you will pick up someone, you will pick up the speaker, you can also ask, where shall I pick up? ये आखिरी सेंटेंस रिपीट कर दीजिएगा. Where shall I pick you up? Where shall I pick you up? Okay, sometimes instead of asking about time, you want to suggest a time. You want to suggest a suitable time. For example, you can say, shall we meet at 7:30? Shall we meet at 7:30? So this is a suggestion, but it is in the form of a question. Okay, of course you need to practice a lot, because these sentences, they sound good, but they vary according to the situation, according to the context. But you don't need to be discouraged, you don't need to be disappointed if you make mistakes in the beginning. I keep on repeating that you just be patient and you just keep on practicing, and don't be afraid of the mistakes, because mistakes, as I often say, mistakes are the learning steps. So if you are making mistakes and you are aware of your mistakes, it means you are taking appropriate learning steps. You are moving towards your goal, towards your target. Okay, I would like you to note down these expressions and sentences, and in future you should practice using them. Alright, now let's move on to a little more difficult thing. It is easy to accept an invitation. But what if you cannot accept an invitation for some reason? In that case, of course, you will have to refuse or decline an invitation. And refusing or declining has never been acceptable or never been easy. So we will learn how to decline invitations politely without sounding rude. So if you just say, no, I can't come, that will be very rude. That will be impolite. So today we will learn some expressions that you can use in order to decline an invitation politely. Let's look at the first sentence. Thank you very much, but I'm afraid I can't come. Thank you very much, but I'm afraid I can't come. So for example, if someone invites you to a dinner, would you like to come to a dinner tonight? Would you like to come over to a dinner tonight? And you say, thank you very much, but I'm afraid I can't come. You'll see that this sentence has two parts in it. Thank you very much. The first part thanks the person for inviting you. And the second part, but I'm afraid I can't come, declines this invitation and also says that you are sorry. I'm afraid here means I'm sorry, I feel sorry. In other words, it means that I want to come, but I regret, I feel sorry that I won't be able to come, I can't come. So I repeat, thank you very much, but I'm afraid I can't come. I'm afraid means I'm sorry, I feel sorry, or I feel that the situation is regrettable that I can't come. Okay, let's move on to the next sentence. I'd love to, but I have an appointment with the dentist. Would you have a cup of tea with me? I would love to, but I have an appointment with the dentist. I would love to, as you can see, is a formal expression. This means I would love to come, I would love to join you, I would love to accept your invitation, but I have an appointment. So this is another way of declining invitation politely. And by now you must have realized that when you decline an invitation, it is always polite to give the reason why you are declining. without giving the reason, it can sound very rude. So here you say, I would love to, and then you give the reason why you won't be able to accept this invitation. The reason is, I have an appointment with the dentist. You don't have to give the specific reason like this, but usually it is better. Okay, let's move on to the next sentence. That's very kind of you. Unfortunately, I have a class test tomorrow. So that's very simple. As like the two sentences earlier, if someone invites you, you can say, that's very kind of you. Unfortunately, I have a class test tomorrow. So you thank the person, you appreciate that someone has extended invitation, you express that you feel sorry. The word unfortunately tells that you feel sorry, and then you give the reason why you can't attend, because you have a class test tomorrow. Similarly, to decline a formal invitation, you can also say, I really appreciate the invitation, but I won't be here tomorrow. I really appreciate the invitation, but I won't be here tomorrow. But I won't be here tomorrow does not give the specific reason. It only gives a general reason. You don't tell why you won't be here. You simply say that you won't be here tomorrow, and that is pretty acceptable. Okay, we move on to the next sentence. That's very kind of you. Unfortunately, I'm busy on Tuesday. That's very kind of you. Unfortunately, I'm busy on Tuesday. Okay, you can also say, I really don't think I can. I'm busy this weekend. I really don't think I can. I'm busy this weekend. Two more expressions here. Thanks, but I won't be able to make it then. Maybe another time. Thanks, but I won't be able to make it then. Maybe another time. This sentence is slightly different from the previous ones. Did you notice? Yes, it has three sections. In the first section, you thank. In the second section, you decline the invitation, and in the third section, instead of giving the reason why you can't do it, you actually suggest maybe another time. That means, how about inviting at some other time? Similarly, the last sentence also has these three sections. No, thank you. I've got something else on. Maybe next time. No, thank you. I've got something else on. Maybe next time. Maybe next time is a suggestion. And the second sentence, I've got something else on, got something else on means that I have another appointment. Okay. All right, now here you have actually a long list of sentences that you can use to decline invitations politely. In fact, you should try to practice it as much as you can, and try to use a variety of sentences so that you don't just repeat the same expressions again and again. You must have noticed here that instead of teaching you grammar rules, I am focusing more on how you will perform these functions in English. And that's because our course is functional English. And here, instead of teaching you theoretical rules of grammar, we actually look at expressions that are culturally appropriate and phrases that are useful to make you a proficient speaker. So maybe you have to note down these sentences like before, and you need to practice them as often as you can. Okay, here now we look at some sample dialogues. So far we have looked at expressions for inviting, expressions for accepting invitations, and expressions for declining invitations. Now let's have a look at some sample dialogues. Let's look at some sample dialogue which is informal. Person 1 says, "Let's go out for a movie tonight." Let's go out for a movie tonight. And person 2 responds to it by saying, "Yes, let's do that." "Where should we meet?" "Yes, let's do that." "Where should we meet?" Person 1, "I'll pick you up from your home at 8. Person 2, "Thanks, mate." Now this last, "thanks, mate," is very informal. You only use it for your close friends. And it is pretty common in the UK. Okay, let's look at dialogue number 2. Person 1, "Shall we get some dinner tonight?" "Sorry, I'm busy tonight. Maybe next time." "That's okay." Okay, now let's look at some sample dialogues in formal situations. "Would you like to come over for dinner?" "That would be nice. Thank you." I repeat. "Would you like to come over for dinner?" "That would be nice. Thank you." And probably you noticed that this time, because the dialogue is formal, we are using formal expression like "would you like to," "would you like to." Come over means visit. "Would you like to come over for dinner?" means would you like to visit us for dinner? And in response to this, person 2 says, "That would be nice. Thank you." That would be nice means that person 2 appreciates your invitation. Okay, we move on to dialogue number 2. Person 1 says, "I would like to ask you for a visit to our company anytime this week." "Oh, I would love to, but I am awfully busy these days." "Oh, I hope you do get time to visit at..." ये पूरा डायलॉग 2 दोबारा से मैं पढ़ता हूँ. पहले वाला काट के ये नया लगा दीजिएगा. Person 1, "I would like to ask you for a visit to our company anytime this week." Person 2, "Oh, I would love to, but I am awfully busy these days." Person 1, "Oh, I hope you do get time to visit us next week then." "Oh, I hope you do get time to visit us next time then." So you see, this formal sample dialogue is really very difficult to pronounce because it is long and it involves complex structures in it. Okay, now we look at some practice situations, and by practice situations I mean that I'm going to give you some situations, and using these situations you would practice the dialogues and expressions that you have learned so far. So let's have a look at these situations. Once you understand these situations, you need to write down what you will speak. You need to write down the script for your dialogue. But first, find a partner. Find a partner with whom you will practice this dialogue. Once you have found a partner, you will use the following suggestions and you will try to practice inviting people for various occasions. Okay, now let's look at the first situation. Invite your boss over for dinner next week. Invite over means simply invite. Invite your boss over for dinner next week. Of course, this is a formal situation, and you have to be really careful in writing your script and in acting it out. So this is going to be a pair work activity. You need to find a partner, tell him or her that he or she will be your boss, and you are going to invite him or her to a dinner next week. Try to use a variety of expressions. Don't repeat the same expression. Okay, the second situation is invite a friend out for a cup of tea. Of course, this is informal because you are going to invite your friend, and it is not a special event, it is simply inviting him or her to a cup of tea. The third situation, invite an important person to have high tea with you. Important person. This again means that this dialogue is going to be set in formal situation. What about the word high tea? Do you know what high tea means? High tea is an expression. It is used for tea when you invite someone to tea, but it also has lots of other things with it, like snacks, like lots of things that usually go with tea. So it is really an expensive, and usually in big hotels, restaurants, they offer high tea service. Okay, let's look at the next situation. The next situation is that you are supposed to invite your brother or sister over for a barbecue. That means you are going to arrange a barbecue party at your house, in your backyard, or on the rooftop, and you are going to invite your brother or sister. And of course, this is going to be really very informal. The next situation is that you are supposed to invite a resource person to convene a session in a training workshop. Suppose that you are going to conduct a training workshop in your school, and you are the program coordinator, and your headmaster or the principal has asked you to invite a resource person for that occasion. So you will assume that you are a program coordinator, and you will invite a resource person to conduct a session in the training workshop. Suppose that this is a teacher training workshop. And of course, this again is going to be a formal situation. Okay, let's look at the last situation, and that is invite your colleagues to a housewarming party. What is housewarming party? Housewarming party simply means that you are moving into a new house. You have just moved into your own house, new house, that is you have just constructed, and you want to celebrate it. So you conduct a housewarming party. So housewarming party is like when you move into a newly constructed house of your own, you invite your relatives, your friends, colleagues, so that you can celebrate that occasion. You are going to, this could be both formal and informal, but I want you to keep it informal for this situation at least. Okay, so here you have some practice situations. that you must follow, because otherwise if you just listen to this lecture and don't do any follow-up activities, don't actually practice it, then it's really difficult for us to teach you English proficiency. The more you practice, the more proficient you will be. Okay, now we move on to writing, and we begin with writing a formal invitation card. You know what kind of invitation cards there are. You often receive one invitation card in Pakistan, and that is an invitation card for a wedding ceremony. But in fact, we can have invitation cards for all sorts of formal occasions. When you are supposed to write a formal invitation card, you need to keep the following points in mind. I've also provided these points in the handout so that you can later review it. You can download the handout and then you can review it for later reference. But let's look at these points first. Point number 1, place the organization or host's logo or graphic at the top of the invitation. Remember that this is formal invitation card. So usually the first thing that you write or the first thing that you copy on top of it is the logo of your organization or a graphic. Or sometimes it could simply be the title of the name of your organization in printed form. Number 2, you will write full name of the host or the hosts. For example, you say Mr. and Mrs. Peter, or you can say Mr. Sphere. Okay. Remember that this is the name of the host, the person who is inviting. Then you extend the invitation. And how do you extend the invitation? By through certain phrases like you are cordially invited to, or if I connect it with the previous point, you can say Mr. and Mrs. Peter cordially invite you to. And then we move on to the next point, which is to provide information about the event. What event it is. Is it a wedding ceremony? Is it a birthday party? Is it a housewarming party? Is it a sales meeting? Is it a seminar or a training workshop? Okay, point number 5 is you must state the purpose of the event. This is really important because it should inform the people whom you are inviting the purpose of the event. For example, if it is a training workshop, the purpose is to train the teachers, the secondary school teachers, for example. And this will give an idea to the resource person what kind of content he or she should prepare. Number 6, provide the date of the event. Of course, you shouldn't forget it. This is very crucial information. And you should double check that you have written the correct date. In fact, you should write the day and date both so that there is no confusion left. It is always advisable that you check the calendar. Okay, point number 7 is to write the time of the event in full. And by full, it means that you should give the time along with AM or PM, so there is no confusion left. Number 8 is also a crucial piece of information. you must provide the location of the event and its address. So where this event is going to take place, give its complete address. Nowadays, some of the advanced people, advanced in technology, some of the people who are good at technology, they use Google Maps service on the internet. They print out the map and then they attach it with their email. And usually it is a good thing whenever you are inviting people, giving the Google map could be quite interesting. But otherwise you can give the street address, you can give, you can even give the detailed address so that there is no difficulty for the people to come and attend the event. Okay, number 9 is provide special instructions if any. If any means that this point is optional, and special instructions could be about how many people they can bring along, if they need to wear any special dress, if they need to follow any particular procedure for registration, if they have to bring the entry ticket, etc., etc. And the last, include your RSVP information. RSVP, probably you found this word RSVP or this abbreviation on invitation cards. RSVP is actually a French word and it stands for Répondez s'il vous plaît. R is répondez, S is s'il, V is vous, and P stands for play. Répondez s'il vous plaît. Répondez means reply. S'il vous means if you. S'il vous, if you. And play means please. So in English you can translate it as please reply. Usually you write these letters RSVP at the end of the card, and under it you give the name and the contact number of the people whom the people can contact to tell whether they are attending the event or not, and they can also seek further information about the event. So RSVP actually means that you want your invitees or the people whom you are inviting, you want them to reply and tell whether they will be attending the event or not. So here you have writing a formal invitation card. I'm going to give you a practice situation again, and as before, earlier you invited a resource person orally, but this time you are going to invite in writing. So here is the practice situation. Suppose you are the program coordinator at your school. Your school is organizing a week-long teacher training workshop. You want to invite some guests to the closing ceremony of the workshop. Use your imagination and compose an invitation card for the event. I have provided this practice situation in the handouts so that you can study it later and you can analyze it thoroughly before you can actually produce an invitation card following the points that we have discussed earlier. So you would find one handout both for the points that you should keep in mind while writing the invitation card and also the practice situation. Okay, now we move on to writing an invitation letter or writing an invitation email. The only difference between letter and note or letter and card is that card is usually very brief, whereas letter can contain other information as well. You can either use a letter format, or you can simply use the body of the letter in the body part of email. In the handout, I have provided you with a sample invitation letter. Okay, so I would like you to download that accompanying handout. It is called Sample Invitation Letter, and I would like you to go through it and analyze it thoroughly, completely. And once you have done that, you are supposed to write a similar invitation letter based on the following situation. Suppose you are the program coordinator at your school. Your school is organizing a week-long teacher training workshop. You want to invite a resource person to convene or conduct one session in the workshop. Use your imagination and write an invitation letter to the resource person. So the situation is the same. First, you were asked to perform a dialogue with the resource person. Then you were asked to write an invitation card to the resource person. And now you are asked to write an invitation letter to the resource person. And for this, I would like you to look at the sample invitation letter and keep the basic points in mind. You can actually use the same structure. You can analyze it by looking at first, second, and third paragraph, and then you can use the similar pattern when you write your own invitation letter. But the story actually doesn't end here. When you send an invitation letter to the resource person or to someone else, definitely he or she is going to either accept it or reject it. So you are also going to write a follow-up letter. Suppose that the resource person has accepted your invitation. In that case, how would you thank him or her, and how would you give further details? And once again, in the handouts, you will find sample follow-up letter. And I would like you to go through this sample follow-up letter and analyze it thoroughly. And then you are supposed to write a similar follow-up letter based on your previous invitation letter. So for this, you will have to use your imagination quite a lot. Remember that writing these letters should be practical. It should be based on reality. What happens is that in our education system, normally we ask our students to write letters that are not to be read by any recipient. They are only to be evaluated by the teachers. So for example, funny thing, most of the times the students, they have to write examination hall. Now in their real life, they would probably never write a letter to someone sitting in the examination hall, or while they are sitting in the examination hall themselves. So I would like you to think about a real life situation and try to write a letter as if you are writing to a real person, not to your instructor, not to your lecturer for evaluation. So with this, we come to the end. I would like to summarize what we learned in lecture number 4. In lecture 4, we learned to use polite expressions of invitations. We learned various expressions, how we can invite either in formal situations or in informal situations. We also learned how to invite others through dialogues And of course, if you can extend it, you can also practice this dialogue through a telephone call. You can assume that you are inviting someone through a telephone call. For example, if you can recall, I asked you to invite a resource person to the teacher training workshop. You can do that dialogue over a telephone, or at least you can assume that you are doing it over a telephone. Then in lecture 4, you also learned how to accept an invitation politely. The word politely is really important here. Merely accepting an invitation is not enough. I told you that once you accept an invitation, you thank the people who are extending invitation to you, and afterwards you accept the invitation. Okay, in lecture 4, we also learned how to decline an invitation politely. This is even more important because declining or refusing is not easy. So you have to be careful. And once you are declining an invitation, you must give a reason why you can't do it. And then in the end, you are going to practice the skills that you have learned by writing a short invitation letter or an email. And once your invitation letter or email is accepted, you are also supposed to write a follow-up letter or an email. Now, before we end this session, I would like you to focus on our approach. If you can recall, in the very first lecture, I said that our approach would be functional. It won't be theoretical. It won't be mechanical. So instead of memorizing these expressions or cramming it like a parrot, I would like you to make a phrase bank in which you should note down the expressions that are useful for inviting someone, for accepting an invitation, for declining an invitation, and you should keep on practicing it in various situations, in various contexts. In fact, it is a general advice, and you should make a phrase book for all the lectures, because our lectures would be focusing on a particular speech function that you can perform in English. That's end of lecture number 4. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learnt quite a lot. And in future, whenever you need to invite someone in English, you will feel confident, and you will also be able to respond to invitations, either accepting it or rejecting or refusing it. And you will also learn, you will also practice how to write a short invitation card or an invitation letter, email, and similarly the follow-up letter. Thank you very much. Goodbye.